Pranakasha livestream.
Hey folks, it's Matt at Pranakasha Productions, and today we're going to be talking with Rob Jones of Rob Jones' Journey. So before we get started though, folks, I want to remind you, if you like these videos, be sure to express your support and actually press the like button. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and also leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you, and I guarantee every comment that people leave, I, Matt from Pranakasha Productions, aka Pranakasha Matt, will read those comments and then respond as Pranakasha Productions, and it's actually me. So like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the video on Twitter and Facebook, all those great things. If you do that, YouTube will love us. The YouTube AI will help promote the video and help us create even more great content. So today, Rob Jones. I know Rob because my day job is as an IT guy, and we had one of our quarterly IT department-wide meetings, and Rob was invited as a guest speaker and gave an amazing show. I wouldn't call it a show, I guess a sharing and motivational speech. And then at the end, he said, if anybody wants to contact me, here's my contact info. And I said, yes, I do. I want you on my show. So here we are. So Rob, just launch in and tell us your story.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll do it kind of briefly. We could probably go on for hours and hours doing the whole thing, but I was I was a Marine. I joined the Marine Corps in 2006 and deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan during the War on Terror. Iraq in 2008 and Afghanistan in 2010. And my primary role was finding IEDs, basically, improvised explosive devices. So anytime we would come up to a place where we thought there might be one, I would go in first and make sure the area was safe, find a safe path through that area. And unfortunately, one day in Afghanistan, July 22nd in 2010, I lost the game of cat and mouse with IEDs, and the IED found me that time. And that resulted in double above knee amputations of my legs when I stepped on it. And I recovered at Walter Reed for about a year and a half, learning how to walk again and learning how to, just kind of do all the different activities that I thought I might be able to use moving forward, or that I could use. Running, riding my bike. I learned how to row when I was there, all sorts of different things. And then finally retired in December of 2011 and kind of set out to find a new path for myself that would bring me meaning and purpose and enjoyment in life. And the first thing I tried was the Paralympics, rowing, because the Paralympics were in 2012. And so it was kind of good timing. And so I found myself a rowing partner, and we trained for about 9 months. That's all we really did was eat, sleep, and train. And we won a bronze medal in the Paralympics in September of 2012. And I also met my wife there, who is an English rower. And we started dating about a year later, long distance. But I knew that, rowing wasn't really going to bring me, it brought me enjoyment. I definitely enjoyed it, but I struggled to find the greater purpose, greater meaning behind it that kind of matched what I was doing in Afghanistan. And so I tried to find something else that might fulfill both those requirements. And that's what led me to get on my bike and start riding it across the country, raising money for veteran charities, and just going on this grand adventure. And that took me about 6 months. I rode from Bar Harbor, Maine to Southern California, Camp Pendleton near San Diego. And I did that during the winter time. It was 2013 was the year of the polar vortex. I don't know if you remember that. It was the first polar vortex, I think.
I probably wasn't the first polar vortex in the history of the planet, but
I guess it was like the first time they had coined the term,
Yeah. I remember I made a big deal about it.
And now every other week it's another polar vortex or a bomb cyclone or whatever.
Oh, what's it? They also have like the river in the sky or something like that, you know?
Yeah, there's coming up with all these like, you know, really scary terminology for all these storms.
Yeah.
And so I finished the bike ride in April of 2014. And I wasn't fully satisfied with that, and I didn't really know why at the time. But for lack of a better idea, I tried to make the Paralympics again in 2016, except this time in triathlon. So I spent 2015 and part of 2016 training for that.
Okay,
And
here's a
unfortunately,
stupid question. Exactly what is in a triathlon?
right. So a triathlon is an event in which you swim a certain distance, then hop on your bike and ride a certain distance, and then you run a certain distance. So the first triathlons that
I
were
know
done
you do
were
each of those on a different day, or is it like all in a row?
back to
Or
back to back. So what you do is you swim. So the first one was the Ironman. So these kind of crazy military guys down in Hawaii trying to decide what the best sport, what sport was the most badass. So there was a swimmer, a cyclist, and a runner that all were having this debate. So they decided to do them all back to back to back
okay,
as a little
but back
race
to
for each
back. You
other.
mean? I mean, there's a little bit of, like, you get time to take off your bathing suit and put on your your biking suit or
Yeah. So
whatever.
what you do, so what you do is you get in the water and you swim a
Okay.
certain distance. So an Ironman is like a mile and a half, but my distance was 750 meters. So
Okay.
you swim that in open water, and then you come out of the water, and then you go into what's called transition. So you run into this area where everybody's bike is kind of stacked on all these bike racks. So
Okay.
you run in there and you get on your bike and you run out of transition and you go do the bike ride on the bike course.
Okay.
And then you ride your bike back into transition, and then you put on your running shoes or do whatever you got to do to get ready for the run.
Okay.
And then you go out on the run course, and
Okay.
all that time is counted. So once you start, your time is, all the
Wow.
transition time counts. So you want to be really fast in transition and that kind of thing.
And you're competing with other people that are also amputees.
Yeah, except though my category, I was competing against people that had one fully intact leg, so it put me at a
Oh.
disadvantage. But I did that because I had spent all this time learning how to ride a bike and spent a lot of time learning how to run using running prostheses. So I wanted to put that to use.
Okay.
And I just also have a penchant for trying to do things that are just a little bit too hard for myself, just a
Okay.
little bit harder than I think what I could do. So I wanted to not only make it to the Paralympics, but I wanted to make it in a higher category than what I should be, just
Okay.
because it's an extra challenge.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that particular endeavor was way too hard for me because I didn't really even come close to qualifying.
Okay.
It takes a long time to get into the sort of triathlon system because it's all based around points. And I
Hmm.
was coming from rowing, where it's just they have a race every year, and whoever wins that race goes to represents Team USA.
Okay.
Whereas in triathlon, it's like you have to race in order to get points, but in order to get into the races, you have to have points. So it's kind of
Okay.
this really weird system. That's
Catch
not
22.
why. That's not why I didn't make it. I just wasn't fast enough, and I didn't have enough time to train. Maybe if I had had a couple more years to train, I might have come closer. But
Okay.
anyway,
All right, let's back up.
yeah. I
I'm
mean,
going
I
to
didn't
go
know
all
how
the
far
way
you
back.
wanted me to go.
Okay, now I'm going to go all the way back to um, what inspired you, what inspired you to join the Marines? How did that
Yeah.
happen?
So I was in college. I was a computer science student actually at Virginia
Okay.
Tech,
Okay.
and all I wanted to do at that point was make video games. I wanted to, I was really into video games when I was in high school. That's all I really did.
Now, are you talking
And
first-person shooters or chess
everything,
or
everything, and
space or?
yeah, like computer games.
Okay.
So
What was your
first
favorite
person
game when
shooters.
you were a kid?
What's that?
What was your favorite game when you were a kid?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, I definitely liked Diablo 2, which
Okay.
is like a RPG.
How about
Uh,
Halo?
I didn't really play. I played mostly computer games, so Halo was more like Xbox at that time.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't play a whole lot of Halo, but I did like first person shooters. I played a lot of Half-Life mods.
Okay.
So I don't know if you're familiar with the game Half-Life, but they
Not
they
really.
released an SDK so that you could make your own games basically with their code and their levels and stuff. So
Okay.
that kind of spawned this big movement where people would make these games and other people would play them. So that's kind of what one of the more famous ones is Counter
Okay.
Strike,
What
which
about
became really.
Minecraft? Did you ever do that?
I didn't really play that, um, but I would say Half-Life modifications and some RPGs and that kind of thing.
Okay.
So I was really into them, and I wanted to make my own games. So I went to Virginia Tech for computer science, but I didn't really have the work ethic
Okay.
to. I had my high school mentality, work ethic that I was trying to apply to college, and it just didn't work. And so that kind of resulted in
What was
me.
that?
My high school work ethic was do your homework in the morning before class started, so get to school early, and then not really do it. And it worked fine. I got a 3.5 GPA, and I got into Virginia Tech, obviously, but college is a lot harder than high school is.
Hmm.
And so that strategy didn't work, and I didn't change. And
Of course,
so that kind
college
of
you have a lot more time to do your homework because you don't have classes all day. You got a lot more time on your own hands.
you have a lot more time to do your homework, but you also have a lot harder homework to do.
Okay.
And I just tried to get by with the bare minimum of work that I needed to do, and that wasn't
And
enough.
party
And
the
I
rest of the time or what?
play video games most of the time. Yeah, I didn't.
Okay.
I wasn't a party. I wasn't a party person. I would just sit there, and play video games instead of learning how to actually program video games.
Okay.
And that was my problem. And so ultimately, that resulted in me kind of not really doing well. I was getting D's, in school, and maybe even a couple F's there. Um, and it just that kind of snowballed into feeling lonely and isolated. I didn't have a whole lot of friends, so I just wasn't in a good place.
Okay.
And my friend, who kind of had a similar situation the year before, we were talking on AOL Instant Messenger back when that was still the thing. The
That
the
was a
way,
while ago.
yeah, this is 2005. So,
Okay.
um, and we were just talking, and he just mentioned that he had joined the Marine Corps and he loved it because his dad was a Marine, and so
Okay.
he had a similar existential crisis, I think.
Okay. But you didn't
And
have any family members in the military.
my dad got drafted in Vietnam in the army, but he didn't go to Vietnam. It wasn't like a huge, it wasn't the family tradition or anything.
Okay. By the way,
There you go, Air Force, right
yeah.
on.
But actually, I'm not a. Well, I was in the Air Force National Guard, so
Oh, okay.
that's a bit of a different deal, as you know.
Too bad they didn't have Space Force back when you joined. You probably would have joined
Right.
Space Force, I bet.
No, I was a computer guy in the Air Force.
Yeah.
Yeah. Air Force in the
And
reserves.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, and so he told me that it was the best thing he'd ever done. So that kind of just made me curious. I didn't know a thing about the Marine Corps, so I
Okay.
went down to the library and I got a book out.
Okay.
And because that's one of the things I like to do was read, but I always ended up reading not things for class. I was just reading things
Right.
that I wanted to read. So,
And then, I
uh,
mean, if you did those first-person shooter games, I mean, a lot of them are military-based, so you had some idea of what being a Marine or some kind of soldier was, right?
yeah, as much as you can from video games. I wouldn't necessarily say they were as realistic as they are now, but yeah, a little
Okay.
bit.
Okay.
Um, but I was always playing. I was mostly playing video games where I was shooting aliens and things like that. So
Oh, okay.
wasn't a whole lot. It wasn't like Call of Duty wasn't really a thing back then.
Okay. That's what I was
So
actually
yeah.
thinking of. Yeah.
Um, and so I went down and I read this book called Brotherhood of Heroes about the Battle of Peleliu, and it just really struck a chord. It resonated with me, and
Hmm.
it kind of made me realize that I was missing things like courage and selflessness and brotherhood, kind of the main thing that I felt like I was missing.
Hmm.
And so I think I finished that book, and without even consulting anybody, I went down to the recruiter's office and joined the Marine Corps
Sign me up.
the very next day.
Yeah.
Uh,
What did your parents think of
then
it when they found out?
they were shocked. It
Yeah.
wasn't really something that had been on my radar, or so they didn't even know about it. And so they were shocked, and they kind of, I don't know that they felt that I was doing something wrong. I think they were proud at the same time, but they were
Mm.
definitely shocked, and obviously they were scared because we were in 2 wars at the time. So they kind of knew a little bit better about what a Marine does.
Okay.
Um, and so I joined the Marine Corps and then finished my last year at Virginia Tech as a reservist. And my plan was to go into OCS to be an officer in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
But shortly before it would have became time for me to put in that application, my reserve unit started taking volunteers to go to Iraq.
Okay, hold on for a sec. You're skipping one essential step, which is what was it like your very first day of basic training?
It wasn't as much of a culture shock as you would expect, because once I joined, I started reading a lot of books about boot camp and things like that. So
Okay.
I sort of knew what to expect. But it certainly was scary, because until you've actually been screamed at in your face by a big drill instructor, there's really nothing that can really prepare you for it.
Right.
But I kind of knew.
So what happened when you got first screamed at? What was your reaction?
I screamed, "Aye, sir!"
And that was so you just locked
do.
right in. Because surprisingly, when I got screamed at, because I remember very vividly being on that bus and then in the middle of the night showing up at San Antonio Air Force Base.
Yeah.
We get off the bus and immediately there's a guy there screaming at us, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And everybody else, well, for one thing, I was older. I was like 30, and everybody else in the bus was 18.
Yeah.
I'd had more life experience, and I was like, what the F is this? I mean, I was like, this is ridiculous. I started laughing.
Yeah.
And of course, the more I laughed at him, the more he screamed at me, and we got in a feedback loop immediately, right? So that was me. And then the next thing we know, we're up in this room, and we have to take off all our clothes, and we're all in our underwear, and then he's giving us the routine and basically trying to shock you into like, this is a completely new world, and everything that you learned before that has no value, means nothing. This is the new thing, right?
Yeah.
So, but even then I was like, well, this is a total mind game, and I was still like entertained by it, and of course, whatever. So that was my reaction to it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I was 20, so I didn't
okay.
have as much life experience, and I didn't have that kind of I don't know. I wanted to be a Marine.
Okay.
And so this is part of becoming a Marine. And so I knew that when you get screamed at, you just take it and you scream back at them, "Aye, sir," and you just do what they say at the drop of a hat. So I wanted to be a Marine. I was fully bought in at that point.
Okay.
So yeah, the first time I got screamed at, I just did what they said, because they're screaming at you, telling you what to do.
Right.
And so as long as you do what they say and you acknowledge what they say as loud as you possibly can, and you do it as fast as you can, then you're going to be fine.
Interesting. Yeah, because we weren't supposed to scream
right.
it back. We were just supposed to sit there. We were supposed to have a military bearing and just look straight ahead and say, "Yes, sir," and that was it, but not scream it back.
We didn't. No, you don't scream back what they said to you. You scream, "Aye, sir," as loud as you possibly can, or "Yes,
Okay.
sir," "No, sir."
Yeah, we didn't even have to yell. We would just say, "Yes, sir."
Oh
Like
no,
that.
we had to scream as loud as we could, and if we didn't scream loud enough, then they would make us do it until we did. And
Okay.
a lot of the times, the requirement for how loud you're supposed to scream was beyond what you could possibly scream. So, like you said, it's a mind game. You're never perfect enough. You're never good enough, and that's kind of the idea.
Right.
To kind of show you that you can always be better. And but yeah, there's a whole lot going on in boot camp, and you could do a whole podcast about, or a whole show about the mental aspects of boot camp and
right
how it breaks you down and builds you into the Marine. But that's kind of what.
And of course, Marines are way different than the Air Force. The one good thing about me being in the reserves was that when I got back to my unit, it wasn't just all Air Force people. We had Marines, Army, Navy, any branch was now in my Air Force Reserve unit. So I got to meet all these different people from the different branches and realize, okay, well, Air Force is way different than the Marines, that's for sure.
Yeah.
As you know, I mean, you guys make jokes about us. Like the biggest joke about the Air Force is everybody calls us the chair force.
Yep.
Like all we really do is desk jobs, and we don't even. And our training on how to actually fight like a soldier happens like once every 2 years. We go to the firing range and spend a day learning how to how to take apart an M16 and shoot it and put it back together, and then
Well, it's not really your role. I mean,
yeah,
unless you're a pararescue jumper, but I mean, we called in plenty of Air Force A-10s, and we were extremely happy when they
well,
showed
that's
up.
different.
And
Yeah,
to get that A-10 to us to deliver close air support to kill the bad guys that were shooting at us requires all this logistical support and people sitting in chairs getting that airplane over to us. So,
yeah.
we were extremely thankful to have that A-10 on station, or F-18s or whatever were there,
Okay.
helicopters that take out wounded
Well,
guys.
F-18 is Navy.
What does Air Force have? Do they have
F-15,
F-16s? What do they have?
F-16s and F-15s.
Okay,
And
and
now they got the F-35s
yeah.
and
Okay,
then
well,
the F-22s.
whatever
Yeah.
jets and planes and helicopters, some of them were Air Force, some of them were Navy, some are,
Yeah.
some of them were even British.
Yeah.
All those planes are supported by, all these people back in the offices doing what they got to do.
Yeah.
So I don't have any ill feelings or anything for people that are in the Air Force or anybody that's, it's all one big team. So
Yeah, like what they talk. I don't want to get stuck because you said you have about an hour, and we've already blown 20 minutes in my rabbit hole.
like I
So,
said, I could go on for hours and hours and hours.
so can I. So, but I was like, what they taught us. My unit eventually got activated, and we were gonna go to Bosnia. So then we got some real combat training.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what the guys told me is like, if your base, because basically our mission was to put up an air base within like 24 hours time, set up a temporary air base and set up all the communications and all the computer stuff for it really quick. Right. That's what we did. And then, but we were getting trained. Now, what do you do if you get overrun? If you guys are under attack and the enemy's attacking, what do you do?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we'll get our M16s and shoot at them. And the guys are like, no, that's not what you do. Since you're Air Force, what you do is you run like hell and let the Marines fight it.
Not a bad idea.
Like, okay. Because, of course, we don't know anything about combat. We would get mowed down. I mean, we didn't know the first thing about how to lay down any kind of fire lanes or, I mean, we sort of knew how to shoot an M16 in a certain direction, but we knew nothing about what you actually need to know what to do.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I went up. So we're gonna have to fast forward now. So what is it about the Marines that is so great besides learning how to be a soldier? I mean, there's something much greater than that, right?
It's the brotherhood aspect of it that I think is what attracted me, and I think what attracts most people. And what I think also makes the Marine Corps so effective is that it's a group of people that are all of the same mind as you, and you are all depending on each other for your lives, and you're all willing to lay down your lives for each other.
Okay.
And you are going into the world's most atrocious situations, and that's war a lot of the time, or really, really, really difficult training. And so when you do that, when you experience really difficult situations, that builds a bond with you and the people that you went through that situation with. Okay. And so then you go into more difficult situations, and it kind of builds this really strong bond. And so develops.
So to put it in Star Trek terms, joining the Marines is like being assimilated into the Borg.
Not quite. We still are able to think freely. I don't know if can you do that in the Borg? I don't think you can, right?
I guess it's debatable. I mean, for most Star Trekkies, if being assimilated into the Borg is considered a bad thing.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably more like being assimilated into the Klingon.
Okay.
Because you are a badass warrior, and you can still think freely.
And you believe in honor.
And they encourage that. They want you to think freely. They want you to be. I mean, that's kind of one of the misconceptions about the military in general, is that everybody's a Borg, and you just do what you're told at all times. But it's not really the case. You follow orders, but if there's an order that you think is
unlawful,
not correct, then you are encouraged to
if when your leadership is good, you're encouraged to speak up, and you're not required to do anything that's illegal or wrong, morally wrong. And so, I would say in that way, it's not like the Borg, but at the same time, the Borg probably have a lot of brotherhood with each other, and they are all kind of bought in to what the Borg are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of the time, Marines are really bought into the Marine Corps mission and what the Marine Corps is. So there's some
Okay.
similarities there, but it's not to the point that, you're a mindless automaton.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Then, so you mentioned brotherhood, but could you describe what that is, what that feeling is, or what's so great about this, what brotherhood is?
Um, I mean, again, this is another subject you could talk about for a very long time and really dig deep. So if I was going to summarize it briefly, I would say it's being a part of a group, um, in which every member of that group puts the group before themselves in every
Okay.
situation, to the point that, and what makes the Marine Corps so powerful is that it's a life and death type of thing, where the Marine will put their life on the line for everybody, every other Marine, everybody else in their group.
Okay.
Um,
That sounds like communism to me, and that supposedly communism is a bad thing.
um, I don't think, I mean, I think the difference between that and communism is that communism, you're kind of forced to do it, whereas the Marine wants to do it because
But you
they
signed a
love their
contract, and
fellow.
after you sign the contract, you're pretty much forced to do it.
Yeah, but you're signing that contract willingly.
But I'm
The
pretty
U.S.
sure, like,
government,
your
Marine Corps
typical
says,
Russian Communist Party person has agrees that they're. I mean, if they're pro party and they bought into it, they would say they freely are part of this and they believe in it,
well,
right?
I'm not saying that communism doesn't have some aspects of brotherhood in it, but I think the difference is the free will to choose to enter into that contract.
Okay.
Uh, and then and so you want a Marine or a soldier or airman, they want to put their lives on the line for their fellow Marines because they love their Marines more than they love themselves.
Okay. Service
So
before self. That used to be an aircraft or Air Force tagline. They probably still have it. Yeah.
yeah, that's a good way to put it. So when I was in my platoon, I cared about every member of that platoon more than myself, and that's why I was able to take a metal detector and walk into an IED minefield, because I was doing it because they were relying on me to do it to keep them safe.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get to. So,
Yeah.
how did you end up getting that job in the Marines?
It was kind of by chance. The reserve unit that I joined was a combat engineer unit, and that's just what they specialized in. And so
But you joined that unit, or you were just basically assigned to that after you were enlisted.
I was assigned to that unit, to that reserve unit, because it was close to my college. It was the closest one, to where I joined up. So I was in Blacksburg, Virginia, and this reserve unit was in Roanoke, Virginia.
Okay.
And so that's the one they sent me to because I was joining the reserves.
Okay. That was
It just
before
happened
basic training or after?
after. Yeah. So
Okay.
every Marine, you go to boot camp and then you go to your unit after that.
Okay.
So that was a combat engineer unit, and they had combat engineers. And one of the roles of combat engineers historically has been minefield defeat and minefield emplacement. And so that job kind of fell to when IEDs started becoming more and more common in Iraq and Afghanistan. That role kind of naturally fell to the combat engineer to defeat those obstacles, because we had the experience and the training and using metal detectors and things like that. And then
Okay.
they also brought in explosive ordnance disposal later on to dispose of the IEDs, and they did a little searching too. But the primary searchers were the combat engineers.
Okay.
So infantry units, they are trained in infantry tactics and doing that kind of fighting. And so what would happen would be a combat engineer would be embedded with one of them, with a platoon, and they would just kind of spend all their time with the infantry as a part of that platoon, basically, or a part of that squad.
Okay.
and they would just be kind of another infantry guy with a metal detector that also knew how to. No, that we weren't as good with infantry tactics and that thing because we didn't spend all of our time training it, but we would just be another member of the platoon that was able to find IEDs.
Okay. Was there a training aspect? Like, did you train the rest of the platoon how to not get themselves blown up?
Yeah, I mean everybody gets that training just because it was so common. It was the number one threat to people that were out there. So everybody got that training, but I would from time to time give extra tips, or I would kind of get guys spun up on being able to use the metal detector and that kind of thing.
Okay.
But
Did you ever
everybody
find
gets a
yourself
lot
yelling
of
at
that
some?
IED training.
Did you ever find yourself yelling at somebody like, what the hell are you doing, dude? You know, or anything like that?
No, because it's not really an effective way to communicate with people. I mean, in certain situations, let's say I cleared an IED lane, and so when you clear an IED lane, the only place that you know for sure that doesn't have any IEDs in it are the places where I've stepped. So
Right.
basically, what you have is think of like a 2-inch wide tape, like a roll of duct tape would be the lane that I've cleared.
Whoa.
And so basically just roll the duct tape out to the other side, maybe 10 feet or something like that. And you have to do everything you can to stay on that little line of duct tape, basically. So you're kind of like walking that tightrope. Because that's the
Wow.
only, or it would be a little bit wider, but you kind of are able to picture that. So if somebody was coming up to that IED lane and they were about to step off to the side, yeah, I might have to scream at them just because it's an immediate situation that has to be. And if they step over there, then they could be stepping on an IED and killing themselves and everybody else. Um, but except in those really immediate situations, screaming at somebody isn't really the best way to communicate what you want to communicate. So we would, you get the two
Surprisingly, because
things.
at basic training, you were screamed at the entire time.
Basic training is they're not really trying to communicate with you as much as they are trying to um, break you down mentally and get you to, the boot camp is kind of a completely different situation where the screaming is more of an effective tool. But then once you get out into the actual military, then the screaming becomes less and less effective and more pointless.
Right. And I always uh, realize too, they scream at you. I mean, they're also so that you can deal with the shock effect. So that when you're in combat and everything's blowing up around you and everything's gone to hell, you have something to grab onto, some kind of
Yeah,
training that you
yeah,
can.
that's part of it. I mean, there's part, the reason that they make you scream so loud is because in combat you have to scream loud to be heard sometimes.
Okay.
And so there's that, and then there's also, the ability to respond to orders immediately and acknowledge the orders. There's a lot of things that go into it, as to why boot camp is so effective in creating Marines, and the Marines are very good at it. But that's kind of the only place where screaming is a regular way to communicate. And
Okay.
it's not really necessarily about communication. Like I said, it's about more. It's about more than that.
Okay. Okay. All right. So in the interest of time, we got to fast forward now. So so being in the Marines, there's a sense of brotherhood. There's a sense of love.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's a greater sense of like your tribe, I guess it would be one way to
Mm-hmm.
put it,
Yeah.
where like you're a part of your tribe, but your individual self is is greater when it's part of this greater group of people that everybody has kind of a group mission that we all believe in and we're all part of, and we're like a big family, and that just makes you feel good. It's a
Mm-hmm.
good feeling.
Yeah.
It gives yourself more meaning or
Yeah. When
whatever.
you're a
There's
part
all
of a tribe
there's a
like that. Yep.
so
Mm-hmm.
there. I mean, you come off as a very by the book, intellectual, sharp guy,
Oh,
but
thanks.
I'm going to say that beneath that, is there's an emotional aspect to it, which is actually the most important part, right? It's how
Yeah,
we
love.
feel,
Love is what does it.
right? That's
Hmm.
what really matters as a human being, right?
Hmm.
That's at least that's my philosophy. So,
Yeah.
so you had that, and then it was fine for you. You worked out, okay, the guy who clears minds, and
Hmm.
I'm gonna do this the best I can, and this is what I do. And you were the best at it until that fateful day. Can you describe that a little bit? I know you have, so let's just have you do it
I
for
mean, I
us
don't know if
here.
I would say I was the best at it because obviously result is the result, but I was,
Okay.
okay at it.
Okay.
um,
But you tried to be the best, right? You weren't just
yeah, I did everything I
slacker.
could to be the best. Yeah, and I
Okay.
wasn't bad, but but I obviously I would. I'm just kind of being saying that tongue in cheek, but
Right.
um, yeah. So what we were doing was we were doing what's called a push into Taliban territory. So we were kind of moving all of our guys into Taliban land, and just going. And if they shot at us or tried to stop us, we would shoot back, probably kill them, and then keep going and seize mud compounds and seize territory and set them up. Um, and so, as a part of that, we had a lot of vehicles and we had infantry on the outside of the vehicles to protect them. And so, I was with one of these infantry squads that was on the outside of the vehicle column, just looking for ambushes and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Because
And you were kind
obviously
of like the
vehicles.
tip of the spear, right?
Yeah, we were kind of on the flank, so I don't know where we were. I don't remember where we were in the
Okay.
whether or not we were the tip or we were kind of on the sides, somewhere in there, probably
Okay.
close to the front. Um, but basically, we were looking out for ambushes, and in the afternoon, probably around 12:30 or something, we took a break, and then we continued on. And right when we stepped off, our point man stepped on an IED that had been right there in the ground, all sorts of people walking around, and it just so happens he stepped on that ID. And luckily, the IED malfunctioned when he stepped on it. So an IED is comprised of it's a pressure plate
Okay.
that you step on, usually made out of a shampoo bottle with copper wire on the inside. So he stepped on that shampoo bottle that closed the circuit, and that sent an electric charge to the blasting cap. And the blasting cap was supposed to be inside this jug of homemade explosives, and that blasting cap was supposed to set off that big jug. For whatever reason, it didn't, and so just the blasting cap exploded. So it kind of sounded like a firecracker going off under his foot. Uh, but it's not a lot of explosive, so it didn't do any damage to anybody.
Okay.
But the tactics for IEDs for the Taliban and for terrorists is to have one here and then one over here and then one over here, because they know that if one person gets hit by an IED, then we all come and get them. So what they're trying to do is get that first guy and then get the rescuers and then kind of create this bad situation. And so we kind of knew that where there's one IED, there's definitely going to be two, probably three, maybe even four or five. And so that area now became an area that had a high likelihood of containing an IED in it. So
Okay.
it became my job then to find a safe path for everybody to go through, to the other side of it. And so I got out my metal detector and started trying to find a path, and I ended up stepping on a secondary IED. And I was unconscious for about 20 seconds and woke up, and it was about what you would expect from when you see a movie of somebody that gets hit by artillery or steps on a mine or something like that. A lot of blood, a lot of screaming, a lot of commotion,
Was it
and
you screaming or someone else?
me screaming in pain, but other people screaming that they were coming to get me and
Okay.
trying to calm me down as much as they could. But my mind and my body were the conscious and the unconscious had separated from each other,
Did
and
you have any
so
feeling like you were like out of your body, sort of observing the whole thing or anything like
I
that?
didn't feel like I was out of my body observing from above,
Okay.
but I certainly felt like my mind had contained my consciousness into this little section over here, while my unconscious I was kind of watching a scene from my own eyeballs, but without having any control over what my body was doing for a while.
Okay, so you
So
were disassociated. It was one way to
all my
put it.
senses worked. Yeah, disassociate. All my senses worked, but I wasn't telling my body to scream. It was just doing it automatically. It was just reacting to the situation. So it's like my consciousness had been controlled
Okay.
and put into this little box over here, while the rest of my body kind of did its thing, released endorphins or whatever it had to do. And then slowly over time, my consciousness kind of came back.
How long did that
And
take?
30 seconds, maybe, not too long.
Okay.
And then by that time, my fellow Marines, they came to me and they gave me morphine and they put tourniquets on my body, on my legs, and loaded me up onto a stretcher, and they started taking me to a helicopter. And then
Okay.
they actually took me to a tank, put me in the back of this tank, and then made me unconscious. And then the tank took me to a helicopter.
Okay. Do you remember the helicopter ride?
No, because they made me unconscious when I got in the back of the tank.
Okay.
And
So
so
then
once
what was next? You woke up the next day or something, or?
I woke up, let's see, probably 2 days later
Oh, okay.
in a hospital in Germany.
Germany.
So
Okay.
yeah, so they took me to a hospital in Afghanistan to perform life-saving procedures, as you
Mm,
would.
mm.
And then when I was stabilized there, they sent me to another hospital in Afghanistan to stabilize me again. And they sent me to Germany, where basically they just stabilized me long enough for me to be put on not a helicopter, a plane back to Bethesda, Maryland, where the Naval Hospital was. So I think I was back in America 3 days, something like that, 3 to 5 days.
And do
And
you
that's where they
remember
started. Hmm?
the reason? I mean, you're okay talking about this, right? I mean, I'm
Hmm.
just digging right in. Okay.
Yeah, I don't mind.
Okay. So do you remember, like when you woke up in the hospital and you finally were somewhat lucid and started to piece together everything that happened? Do you remember what that was like?
I mean, I wasn't really, I mean, I knew what had happened, at the site of injury. I knew that my legs were, blown off. I didn't know how high.
Okay.
So I knew that I had stepped on an IED, because it's hard not to know that.
So you were already going through your brain, like what your life was going to be like after this
Yeah,
moment?
yeah, yeah. At site of injury, I assumed I was going to be in a wheelchair. I assumed my mom was going to have to like take care of me all day. I didn't know anything about, being an
Now, was
amputee.
this like a second after the explosion? You already was figuring this stuff out, or
After my consciousness time sort of came back, I think is when
okay,
I
but
started
not when you
thinking.
were whoosh, down here.
Yeah, when my mind, I mean, I have a memory of knowing what had happened, you know, during that kind of disconnection, but I wasn't thinking about the future or anything. Like I knew that I had stepped on an
Okay.
IED.
Did you have visions of your life up to that point? You know, when people say my whole life flashed before my eyes or anything
No, I
like
didn't have
that?
anything like that. I never felt like I was gonna die.
Okay.
Um, I don't know why, just because I knew that it was pretty common for people to survive those days, where because we had tourniquets and we had helicopters that come in pretty quickly and they get you to a hospital. I never felt like I was gonna die.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I assumed my life was going to be spent in a wheelchair and just kind of sitting around with my mom, having to take care of me and stuff,
Okay.
which was naive. I mean, I had no idea
Right.
I had no experience with it.
So, okay, so now you're in the hospital.
Hmm.
You're back in America. So then what happened? Like, I mean, did you become angry or become depressed or what happened to you emotionally
I didn't really,
immediately?
I kind of, between Germany and getting to Bethesda, I guess my brain processed everything during that time period. And I kind of made the connection that what my mom was going to be very upset. She was going to be crushed.
Hmm.
And so I kind of made the connection that what was best for her was for me to be fine. And
Okay.
so I think I sort of, and at this point, I still wasn't lucid. I was, high levels of
Morphine and so
painkillers,
on. Yeah. Okay.
Dilaudid, morphine, all that stuff. So I wasn't lucid. I was going in for surgery just about every day, so I was hallucinating and having visions and things like that. So I wasn't really lucid, but somehow in that time period, I made the connection that what was best for my mom was for me to be okay, and so I just needed to be okay, and so
Wow.
I
Have you
manifested
always
it.
been that attached to your mom? Like you haven't even mentioned your dad or even yourself.
Yeah,
It's
I
like your
mean,
mom.
it was kind of the same. My mom especially, but then I knew everybody was going to be crushed. I
Okay.
think my mom, I felt like my mom, because she's, she's your mom, and moms are always a little bit more affected by the bad things that happen to their kids.
Okay.
And so, and my dad was crushed too, don't get me wrong.
Okay.
You know, just that kind of mom and son connection thing.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I just knew that she was going to be really upset, and everybody was going to be upset. My fellow Marines, everybody was. And so I knew that what was best for her and what was best for everybody was for me to be fine.
Did you
And so
feel it's sorry for yourself or anything like, why did this happen to me or anything like that?
I had some thoughts like that, but then I also kind of made the connection that the more time I spent on that, the less time I could spend on creating the future that I wanted, or finding out how I could create that future. So I didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about it
Okay.
because of that.
So how do you attribute, so I mean, basically you're just being very practical and you're
Yeah.
just immediately dealing with the situation. And is that who you always have been, or do you attribute that to your Marine training?
Probably more Marine Corps. I mean, I don't, it's hard to say. I would never face such a difficult situation before joining Marine Corps, so it's hard to say how I would have reacted, like if I was hit by a car and lost both my legs. But
Uh-huh.
I think I would certainly say that the Marine Corps training certainly played a massive role in it.
Okay.
Uh, but I probably also had a natural penchant for this kind of thing too. Nature
Okay.
plus nurture.
Okay. All right. So again, I wish we wouldn't have to rush, but I guess we have maybe 20 minutes left. Is that
Um,
true?
about 10.
10. Oh, wow. Okay, now we're
Yeah.
rushing. So, I mean, like I said, it would take me 5 hours to really dig into this, right? Maybe
Yeah, I
longer.
mean, I've been on
So,
Jocko podcast 3 times and we still haven't really covered everything. So those are
well,
like
maybe
almost
then,
hours long.
do you want to just plan on doing another video with me then?
Yeah,
And
we could
just
probably figure out how to schedule something.
okay, let's figure out how to wrap up chapter one then. So,
I mean, that's probably a good spot to wrap it up because it's kind of, I've reached the hospital.
okay,
I've been stabilized at this point.
okay,
And then so, I spent a week in the ICU.
okay.
And then once they stabilized me enough that I wasn't going to die anymore, or
Hmm.
that I wasn't at risk of death from infections and things like that, they amputated my legs above the knee. So they originally at site of injury, my legs had been severed below the knee, but due to infections or a lot of the times when they do the surgeries and they decide what level of amputee you're going to be, they come at it from a standpoint of what's going to be best for wearing prostheses.
Right,
And so if I had, even if I had bones below my knee, it's not, you can't attach a prosthetic to a bone that's sticking out. So they had to amputate to the point where there was enough viable tissue to wear prosthetics. And so between infections and that consideration, they amputated above the knee.
above.
Yeah,
So
pretty
had they done it
far.
below, then if you had your knees, then that would have a lot more function, right?
Yeah, I mean, the more joints you have, the more function you do have. So it's always preferable to be below the knee and then below the ankle, if you can. So it's always more preferable to have longer stumps, longer legs, depending.
Right.
If I had my knees, but my knees were just completely destroyed, and I couldn't walk without pain, and I could barely walk, then yeah, a lot of the times it does make more sense to amputate above the knee because of that.
Okay.
So it's about what's viable and what's going to be the most effective way to put you back together, such that you're going to have the best life. So
Okay.
that's the consideration that they go through. I don't know what it was. It was probably infection plus, the meat and tissue below the knee that I had probably just wasn't that great. And
Right.
so they amputated above the knee.
Okay. Well,
And so
this
then,
is a huge
you
other
know,
subject we probably should wait till next time about.
yeah,
Okay.
so I spent the week in the ICU, hallucinating and that kind of thing, and going in for surgeries. They stabilized me, and then they sent me up to the post surgery ward on the fifth floor of the hospital, and
Okay.
that's kind of where I started to become, more clear headed, lucid, that kind of thing.
So, do you remember any of your quote hallucinations?
Yeah. So there was one. It always happened during surgery or after surgery. I would go into the surgery, and I would always wake up feeling freezing cold and shivering. Um, and then one hallucination was I was in a bunker, and my mom was with me, and I just remember my legs had been splattered all over the bunker, and there was blood all over the place. And then there was another one where I was going out on patrol, and somebody shot me in the neck, and everybody else was just continued on the patrol, and I was laying there, shot in the neck. Those are the only two that I really remember. And then every time I closed my eyes, I couldn't really, when you close your eyes, it's just kind of like this kind of red, black nothingness.
Spots,
But
yeah.
when I did that, I would just have visions. It would feel like I was flying over like desert, and it would just be like, if I was flying over desert and looking down, I just had like this movie playing of that. Or I remember there being like the aliens from the Alien movie,
Mm-hmm.
like them like running around and doing stuff. So, and I remember I would see ants in my bed, just various things like that.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
hallucinating.
Yeah, okay. And that's probably a combination of the drugs plus also your mind just trying to deal
Yeah,
with the shock of it and everything. Wow.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, we got tons to talk about.
Mhm.
Okay, let's wrap it up, I guess,
All right.
for now, and then we'll just plan on doing part two whenever we can in a week or so, if that's possible?
Yeah, I mean, my wife's sister and brother-in-law are in town for the next couple weeks, so we'll probably do it after that.
Okay. Well, we'll
After
just
they,
email each other and
yeah.
schedule the next thing. We'll put some links in the description. Obviously, your website
Mhm.
is the important thing. And then you said you had a YouTube channel also?
I don't have a YouTube channel, but if you Google Rob Jones Marine in YouTube, you'll get all sorts of videos of me.
Okay.
I have
So
really
what
good
I'm,
SEO. You just Google Rob Jones, and I'm like the first page, the whole first page,
okay.
I think.
Is there anything else you want me to put down there, like your Facebook page probably?
I'm not too active on Facebook. Instagram and LinkedIn are kind of where I do most of my social media,
Okay.
both at Rob Jones Journey.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
you do have an email account, but I guess probably the best way to contact you is just through the contact part of your website, right?
Yeah, that or Instagram, LinkedIn. I check those messages just like when people contact you on YouTube or whatever. I
Okay.
pay attention to it. I don't have
Great.
so many followers that I can't, respond to a message.
Okay. And then we should do a plug. So a part of what your career now is motivational speaking, right?
Yeah, so I kind of built this story, and then what I'm trying to do now is use that story to help people.
Okay. And so basically corporations like the place I work, King County,
Hmm.
invite you to come and you give a presentation and you obviously get paid because it's your career. And
Yeah,
so,
it's a way to make a living.
right. And
Um,
so,
yeah, and so usually they bring me in for things like the library day, or a lot of the times it's just they want to help their employees with their well-being, and so
right.
part of your well-being is to have a positive attitude and have a good mindset.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of where I specialize in, where I come in and tell my story, and I give people strategies on how they can have a mindset that allows them to do, I share with them the mindset that allowed me to do all the things that we're going to talk about, recover quickly from my injury, and then have the vision to do all these other things as well.
Right.
And so I kind of
Yeah.
try and share that with people and give them strategies so that when they're facing their challenges, they can kind of use those strategies to overcome them and that kind of thing. So,
Right. And that's going to be a subject of a later video because obviously we've just basically done the preamble to all that.
hmm
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I guess that's probably it then for now. So
Cool.
thanks, Rob. I mean, it's great getting to know you a little bit, and I'm looking forward to the next video. And
Yeah, it's gonna be great. Appreciate
we'll
you having me
schedule it.
on. It's been a great conversation.
All right. All right. Take care, sir.
You too.
Till
Thanks a
next-
lot,
So
Matt.
did you end up being an officer? I forgot about that.
No, so because you know, we got that volunteer platoon going to Iraq, and then shortly after we got back from Iraq, they were sending another volunteer platoon to Afghanistan. So I just wanted to keep fighting the bad guys, and so we never really got around to applying to OCS.
Okay, so I actually shouldn't call you sir then.
Well, you can call me sir. You can call me whatever.
I want to like, yes, sir. Anyway, okay, very good to get to know you, and we'll continue this conversation next time.
All right, sounds good.
All right, and
man.
you are a
Thanks a lot.
Trekkie, right?
I mean, it's an enjoyable show. I'm not like probably not as big a fan as you are, but
You know what this
yeah,
means, right?
I know the long and prosper, so I know
All
that.
right.
We watched I think all the Star Trek movies when I was in Iraq, so,
Oh, cool. Okay.
and this was before all the new ones came out.
Okay. I highly recommend the new show, Strange New Worlds.
All right,
Yeah,
I'll take a look
just
at
came
it.
out, Paramount Plus. I think you'll really like it.
All right, cool.
All
Yeah,
right.
I'll take a look.
Take care, sir. Until next
too.
time.
Thanks, Matt. Later.
Pranakasha production. Fantastic creations emerging spontaneously from the space of life.
For the benefit of all beings everywhere.
We gotta change.